Live from the City of Angels here on the Sunday morning. Yes, indeed, it's breaking box office, and we're going to start with the film that came in second place because it's the biggest story, continues to be. It is Dune Part 2, down just 44% in its second weekend here stateside. Listen to this. This film is now up to $367.5 million globally, including $20 million in China this weekend, as this thing is firing on all cylinders. Look at this now. We're talking about $157 million domestically. Let's go through some of those highlights first. You look at a $46 million second weekend, which is, again, down just 44%. Very rare, as is highlighted here by Warner Brothers in the email. It's rare for sequels at the gross level, the money it's making, to drop less than 50% on a second weekend. There's less than 30 films in the history of the box office have been able to do this, especially with that large opening. Listen, we talked about how this was going to be beneficial for Dune this week and going forward, is that there's a lack of competition. Now, we'll get to Kung Fu Panda 4, which did quite well, actually, almost as good as the original did in 2008. But without anything else in the marketplace to siphon off cash, you're looking at a situation where Dune 2 can run wild and free for the next several weeks. Really an ideal drop point. We talked about this last night on the Oscars pre-pick show. We talked about how when they moved this film out of 2023 to 2024, the reason they moved it to this point in the scheduling calendar is, remember the Batman Slade. In those COVID conditions, it still did amazing numbers, over 700 million worldwide. So they knew this was a good spot for a film that would draw on those cinephilic moviegoers that also, you can draw the mainstream moviegoers in as well, as we saw with the Batman. And in this case, it's really a perfect situation. We'll talk more tonight about Dune 2 and the Oscars next year, because that will be a bit of a challenge because it's so early in the year. But let's talk about box office, continue here along with the weekend numbers. 50% of the total business so far from the PLF, right? IMAX, Dolby, 70 millimeter. Motion seating, 4DX, whatever it is, it's what people want to see this movie in, and it makes sense because it is an event film, and it is showing in IMAX 70 millimeter at many locations, so people want to take advantage of that. Top 10 locations quickly. AMC Lincoln Square, New York City, again, number 1. TCL Chinese, LA, 2. Cineplex in Montreal, 3. San Francisco, AMC, 4. Regal Irvine Spectrum in Orange County, 5. Toronto, Cineplex, Scotiabank, 6, 7. AMC Burbank, we're falling. Pick it up, boys. That's my home theater. AMC Empire, New York City, 8, 9. Cineplex, Montreal, and 10. Cineplex, Montreal. Listen, Canada's coming in for this. We knew this. Denis is Canadian. They love their Denis Villeneuve. And you can see it here in the top 10 locations. In fact, Toronto is number 5. Somehow Montreal's not in the top 10. LA, number 1, New York, 2, and San Francisco, number 3. And let's talk about those world numbers. They just came in, and you look at China at $20 million, the importance of that market, having that in play versus a lot of films that don't have that. We've seen that with the Marvel films. There's something objectionable, the Chinese censors say not happening, and you lose a ton of cash. Already off and running with $20 million there, and you look at the international total, you're looking at $81 million this weekend for that 367.5 internationally. Right now, remember, I had this film at 775. I think we continue on this trajectory for the next week, at least, more than likely 2 weekends, until we get into, really, April. That's why this is the perfect drop point for this film. And you're already looking at halfway, essentially, to the number of that worldwide total that we are anticipating. Obviously, we're getting Messiah. You watch 2, you know we're going to get a 3, okay? There's no way there isn't. That film is a cliffhanger, and Denis made it that way so that Warner Brothers, one way or another, would have to make it. They're going to make it because the box office, let's assume it was underwhelming, they still would have to make it because you can't leave it the way that you did But again, halfway to my worldwide total, 775. Does it go above or below that? We'll find out in the coming weeks, but really the best second weekend you could imagine in the situation for Dune 2. Let's talk about Kung Fu Panda 4, which ended up with a big $58.3 million on the debut. That's just a shade under the original in 2008. The biggest Kung Fu Panda debut since number one back in 2008. A little over $60 million on that one. Let's go through some of the demos. Always interesting to look at this because it's a big family film, as you know. You look here. You had 29% of the moviegoers under the age of 17. 48% of moviegoers between 18 and 34. You look at that demo, right? 18 and 34. They're the kids, young adults who grew up with Kung Fu Panda. So they're like, okay, I'm in for 4. You wonder why they made it, because they knew that you had an audience of people who grew up with Kung Fu Panda that would go see it. And then you had the families that would take the kids. And then you have 23% left over, 35 to 55. Those are the parents dragging those young kids into the movie. Caucasian, 30%. Hispanic, 39%. Big number Hispanic on this. And you look at Asian, 14%. Other 7%. African-American, 11%. That's the breakdown of the demos there on that film. Let's go to Imaginary. It's stuffed. Yes, the Haunted Teddy Bear movie stuffed $10 million, which is its budget. That's a solid number, right? That's why horror is the most financially responsible filmmaking you can do these days, because you're going to end up either making a profit or at least not losing a whole lot of cash. Because you look at these films, they don't have any stars in them. You can just put any old actor in the horror film, and it's going to sell the same number of tickets, essentially, as if you have even a remotely recognizable name in it. And that's why we continue to get these, especially Blumhouse. They know how to put these things together at a very low budget. And Imaginary, I didn't see it. I might see it this week because I've got A-List, but I've heard it's terrible. Heard it's not scary. So I don't know why I'm even bothering, but that's what A-List is for, to go see movies that are terrible, because I'm only paying $24 a month to see 12 movies. So it's 24 movies. 12 movies is a lot. That's $2 a movie, for God's sake. Love Lies Bleeding, A24, released this in the platform, the old school platform, New York, LA, 5 screens. Look at the number, biggest PTA of the year at 33,000 per 167,000 for the 5 screens. They're going to go wide, or at least 1,200 screens next weekend. It'll be really curious to see what happens with Love Lies Bleeding, because we all know that A24 films have some trouble gaining a foothold in normal markets, not the cinephilic markets, the New York, the LA, the San Francisco, the Chicago, the Austin, the DC, the Philly, right? All the major markets. When you go outside of that, that could be an issue. I love the film. If you haven't seen my reaction to Love Lies Bleeding, go watch. It is truly a great follow-up from Rose Glass. Much different film than Saint Maud, but I love the style, I love the mood, I love the filmmaking of Love Lies Bleeding. Really excited for you guys to see that movie here coming up next weekend when it goes wide to, again, about 1,200 screens. Top 10 box office. Let's do it on this Sunday morning. Kung Fu Panda, number 1, 58.3. Dune Part 2, number 2, 46 million, down only 44%. Imaginary, 10 million in third. Cabrini, the faith-based film, 7.5 million on the debut. One Love is up to $89 million domestically alone. Ordinary Angels had 6th place lockdown with 2 million. 16 million on that film. Not a big budget on that, so it'll at least break even. Madam Web is only up to $42.6 million with $1.1 million this weekend and $558 per screen. That's terrible. Migration, 125 million here domestically. YOLO. What is YOLO? I don't even know what that is. But it made $840,000 on, must not have been very many screens, because it's got a 4,200 average. And then the Met Opera, number 10, with 768,000, 131.8, 131,800 is the number this weekend, 131 million. That's a really strong number, much higher than we expected because Kung Fu Panda came in big and Dune Part 2 held. And then you have Imaginary kicking in 10 million. It all adds up to a pretty strong weekend here as we get ready to wrap and we get set for tonight's Oscars post-game show live here on MMT. We'll be back about 7:30 is my guess. That's East Coast 7:30, maybe 11, somewhere between that time. I'm probably going to jump on before the Oscars are over, start talking about everything we've seen, and then go forward looking at Oscars 2025. The big winner tonight obviously is going to be Oppenheimer. How many does it win? I have it for 9. Is it 8? Is it 9? Is it 10? Does it get less than 8? We're going to find out tonight. Join me live for MMT's post-game live show here live from LA tonight about 7:30 or so LA time. See you tonight. Thanks for being here. Breaking Box Office is off the air.